knowledge will fail you. The economy will be grounded. Your political connections will be useless. And life in general will be stranded if not ended.
Manipulators, troublemakers, and table shakers will not be exempted.
That is why we must make peace the only option in Nigeria.
Join us in one love to preach peace in all the 36 states in Nigeria, including the FCT.
For peaceful engagements through town hall meetings, rallies, and unity concerts. Remember, the two strongest warriors are patience and time.
Make peace the only option now.
This message is brought to you by the Ambassador of Voice for Change Initiative, supported by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, and the Federal Capital Territory.
Hope in the horizon for improved standard of living for indigent Nigerians as the federal government reiterates its stance on alleviating poverty.
As National Assembly resumes plenary, Senate receives the Explosive Bill 2021 and the Small and Light Arms Bill 2021.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo advocates strategic partnership between government and the private sector to aid post-COVID-19 recovery.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss Nigeria's current revenue sharing formula.
Globally, revenue generation levels are determined by the resource endowment, economic activities, as well as the machinery deployed for efficient generation. Experts explain that stable and robust revenue is dependent on government's ability to stimulate or sustain economic activities, utilizing optimal blends of revenue-generating instruments.
Well, depending on the administrative structure of the particular entity. Now, states and local government areas in Nigeria, for example, rely heavily on their share of revenue allocated by the federation, which in turn, of course, depends heavily on revenue accruing from crude oil, which, of course, operates in a volatile market. Now, over time, it has become obvious that the stability in the oil market directly affects the country's revenue profile.
And revenue allocation to all tiers of government has evolved significantly. For instance, between 1948 and 1988, about 9 fiscal commissions were approved to scrutinize Nigeria's revenue sharing arrangement. So many other fiscal review commissions have been set up after the country's independence, including the controversial Okibo Commission and the country's last general review of the revenue allocation formula done 28 years ago.
Now, at present, the federal government receives the highest share of 52.68% from the federation account, while states get collectively 26.72%, and local government areas receive 20.6%. And 13%, of course, is on the basis of derivation going to oil-producing states.
Ideally, revenue allocation formula is guided by certain factors, including population, quality of states, internal revenue generation, landmass, and principle of derivation. Today, issues of revenue allocation are dominating national discourse, and many state governors are seeking a new revenue sharing formula, prompting the agency responsible for this to take steps towards addressing the agitations.
That's right, Kirian. Now, the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission is currently taking a look at all variables affecting the country's revenue allocation formula. And it has done this through its visitations to various states for data collection to enable the country, as it were, close all the gaps in its revenue sharing formula. The Commission says its review process should be completed by the end of this year, 2021.
And despite, in spite of these classifications by the Commission, many are insisting the population of some states has increased or decreased due to insecurity, and the allocations should either be increased or reduced. That is quite arguable because nobody has taken a
we haven't
census.
We haven't had a census.
Exactly.
The last census exercise we had was in 2006.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Now, concerned persons have also advocated a careful review of the size of revenue allocated to all tiers of government, and of course argue that this should be based on the functions that those tiers of government perform to ensure that the desired impact is felt on the citizens' welfare and overall economic growth.
They also seek more autonomy to enable states and local government areas to generate and spend funds, while machinery for revenue generation should be improved upon. Another key area is the level of internally generated revenue, IGR, in states. Researchers have over time advised states to look inwards to improve on their economic capacity rather than depend on monthly revenue received from the federal government. They also insist that many states are not taking the required advantage of their IGR potentialities.
Well, in looking inward, some states have decided to explore the option of taxes, such as the value-added tax, VAT. And a case in point is the action already taken by Rivers and Lagos states, which, of course, have said that they would now collect all VATs, although the matter is currently sub judice. The Federal Inland Revenue Service is, however, arguing that the National Assembly should include the VAT on the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution and also approve the establishment of the Federal Revenue Court. Now, Kirian?
Yeah. FRS says also that VAT collection should not be the job of states, but the federal government has done in other climes. That is arguable, Kinsley.
That's right. That's why the matter is in court.
I'm not sure. It happens in all climes. So some experts are, however, of the opinion that many states will suffer some revenue decline if VAT collection is the sole preserve of the federal government. These issues inform our review of the country's revenue generating formula. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. I am Kirian Umayo.
And Kirian, it's pretty interesting what is happening already in terms of states' response to revenue generation. Just yesterday, Tuesday, the Kano State House of Assembly passed a resolution calling on the state government, and invariably the state governor, to fire the chairman of the State Inland Revenue Service on account, they say, of the poor performance of the service, either in generating revenue or in terms of its overall standing versus, say, a state like Lagos. Yeah. All right, my name is Kingsley Osadolo. I joined my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria. We have our complimentary segments in the course of the program. These include newspaper review, business, and others. For now, here is Musbao Dan Wahab with the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Musbao.
It's a very good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. The news. Stakeholders in the banking and finance industry have begun a two-day brainstorming session aimed at speeding up the process of recuperating the nation's economy for a prosperous future. President Muhammadu Buhari, who declared the conference open, promised that his administration would continue to engage with those who matter in the Nigeria project towards building a future-forward Nigerian nation.
We continue to progress towards the next frontiers of digitization. We must harness all opportunities while being mindful of the inherent risks. Let me now alert that we are committed to enhancing the health and economic well-being of all Nigerians.
Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo has advocated a strategic partnership among the three tiers of government and the private sector, describing it as critical to post-COVID-19 recovery and building a strong and resilient economy. It was represented by the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment at the ongoing Partnership Economy Nigeria Summit organized by the Ministry of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs.
To build a seamless partnership between our citizens and all arms of government. The federal government is committed to providing practical support to smaller companies at this critical time. That is why we concluded the landmark $1 billion United States syndicated term loan through the Bank of Industry.
President Muhammadu Buhari has written to the Senate seeking the consideration and passage of the Explosives Bill and the Small Arms and Light Weapons Bill 2021. The President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, read the executive communication shortly after the legislators resumed from the annual recess.
The Senate is kindly invited to note that the projects and programs in the borrowing plan were selected based on positive technical and economic evaluations and the contribution they would make to the socio-economic development of the country.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives Committee on Defense has engaged the Minister of Defense in relation to a bilateral agreement signed between Nigeria and Russia on insecurity. The engagement was initiated by the House to obtain details of the agreement.
Nigerian government and the Russian Federation, and as it affects our fight against banditry, insurgency, and kidnapping, and all other vices we have in Nigeria, and also its implication on national security.
A report just reaching us from the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, indicate that the headline inflation slowed down to 17.01% in August 2021 from 17.38% recorded in July. We'll bring you more details on this subsequently. Nigeria is promising a non-stop support towards the eradication of drug abuse in West Africa and the continent at large. Chairman, National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, Buba Marwa, relayed Nigeria's commitment at the launch of the 2018-2019 West African Epidemiology Network on Drug Use when the reports of statistics and trends on illicit drug use and supply.
For informed policy formulation, programming and monitoring of our interventions in the ECOWAS sub-region for better outcome in our drug control efforts.
Good news for Nigerians as Association of Local Governments of Nigeria, AGON, carves out modalities to address the issue of multiple taxation of interstate goods transportation. AGON made this known during her visit to the NTA.
On the lives of Nigerians because it will reduce the cost of food items or any other material moved from one place to another. So it will bring down the cost of transportation.
The massive investment of the federal government in youth empowerment is in line with the vision of the All Progressives Congress (APC) to raise a successor generation of leaders that will build on legacies of the party. Secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, stated this when he received the APC Youth Platform led by the party's national youth leader, Ismail Ahmed, in Abuja.
To you, a process that we believe strongly that if you can just nurture it and hold it, we'll have a greater Nigeria in the future. And the future of the party can only be sustainable. And the ideals for which Mr. President stands for, if we invest in committing the leadership of the party and the leadership in governance to this successor generation that we are raising.
Now, the rate of COVID-19 infection remains high, with 590 new cases recorded in the last 24 hours. In the latest figures released by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, Lagos State still maintains the lead with 120 new cases, followed by Ondo with 110 cases, Rivers 74, Edo has 63, FCT 58, Oyo 31, Kaduna 15, Bayelsa, Cross River and Delta State recorded 11 new cases each, Kano 5, Ogun 4, Plateau 3, Adamawa 2, and Gombe recorded a single case. So far, Nigeria now has a total of 200,057 confirmed cases, out of which 188,719 were treated and discharged, while 2,637 have died of the virus. Emir of Bungudu in Zamfara State, Alhaji Hassan Atahiru, has been kidnapped. The first-class traditional ruler was abducted along with yet to be ascertained number of travelers around Duse village on the Kaduna-Abuja highway. Spokesperson for Kaduna State Police Command, ASP Mohammed Jalige, who confirmed the incident in a statement, says a police officer paid the supreme price during the incident and 2 of the victims sustained varying degrees of injuries. It says a reinforcement team has been dispatched while coordinated efforts are being carried out with a view to rescuing the victims. And that's the morning news for now. More news will come your way in the course of the day. Meanwhile, the program Good Morning Nigeria will continue in just a moment with Kirian and Kinsley. Stay with us.
Trying our best to contain the situation, and in our operations, we've been able to make a lot of recoveries. We've been able to also arrest suspects that are involved in this kind of activities, and we've been able to also recover particularly arms and ammunition from those who are carrying it unlawfully and disturbing the peace of the people. But generally, our morale in the Nigerian police is always guided by our commitment to do what we have sworn to do. Peace and security must be looked into as a priority by all. To look at security as the business of all of us.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Oga Greg, you want to buy cough medicine again? Why haven't you gone for a test like I advised?
Test? So that the hospital people will say I have COVID-19? No.
How about Oga Greg? Not all coughs mean you have COVID-19. COVID-19 cough and symptoms are different from other illnesses like tuberculosis.
Solomon, why don't you ever stay at your post? Why?
This your cough. You need to check am. When I had a bad cough, Madam told me to go for tuberculosis test. After the cough syrups didn't work, they discovered I had tuberculosis. After the free test, I was even treated for free. Now I'm fine.
Solomon is right. Oga Greg, take am make you dey sure, because who no go, no go no.
Check that cough for tuberculosis.
Check am make you dey sure. If your cough is more than 2 weeks, it could be tuberculosis. TB test and TB treatment are free. Just call the National TB Hotline on 3340 for information on where to get the test. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Health with support from the American people.
welcomes you back to school. Have a session filled with lots of fun and excitement. Stay safe, stay healthy. Indomie noodles, tasty nutrition, good for you.
After a surprise loss in the first match of the season, the citizens have hot their campaign back on track. Will they continue in their winning form or can they be stopped? Find out this Saturday as Manchester City welcome Southampton to the Etihad Stadium on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 2:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
Yeah, we thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. And next is a newspaper review.
Bayo Atoyebe, newspaper reviewer, is with us on the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kyria.
Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Today.
Thank you.
Let's begin with the Nation newspaper. And let's turn to the items on the above the nameplate. Agitators take case to UN headquarters. Groups protest in the US. That's on page 3. President Buhari seeks approval for $4 billion, Euro 710 to fund budget. That's a 710 million euro, and of course, $4 billion to fund budget. All right, ex-Nasarawa governor leads APC reconciliation panel. That's on page 5, and soldier killed. Zamfara Emir abducted in Kaduna. That's on page 6. Now, the lead story has a lot to do with our topic this morning. Battle for VAT collection shifts to Supreme Court. Rivers seek to upturn status quo order. Bill passes second reading in Ogun State. The details on page 4. Now, below the photo story, the photo story is parading 56 internet fraudsters. That's in Abuja in Ogun State, with the exotic cars seized by EFCC. Now, below that, we have insecurity. Buhari pushes for arms, explosives, mop up. Details on page 4. States get nod for more borrowing. It's also on page 4. Now, at the foot of the nation, why federal government may not increase wages by the minister is on page 3 of the Nation newspaper. Kinsley.
Thank you, Kieran. We also take a look at the Daily Trust newspaper. Bandits abduct Zamfara Emir in Kaduna Abuja highway attack. PDP governors to National Assembly. Delay in Electoral Act amendment threatens 2023 polls. Equipment purchased by NPTF, that's Nigerian Police Trust Fund, tested and found suitable for our operations. That's according to the Inspector General of Police. Now, vicious ISWAP leader Al-Banawi killed. That's the lead story. Vicious ISWAP leader al-Banawi killed. How he succeeded his father, Boko Haram founder Mohammed Yusuf, and he led terrorist onslaughts on security forces. We're not aware of his death. That's the military, and situation dicey, according to an expert. Al-Banawi, you can see the illustration there of his appearance, relatively young. Federal government's borrowing spree continues as Buhari seeks 2.2 trillion naira loan. Private jets used for gold smuggling. That's according to a minister. Outrage over missing 345 million naira in Kano Sharia Court. Outrage over missing 345 million naira in Kano Sharia Court. I'm sure by the time they convict whoever is involved in that, they have no hands left. Page 3. Kaba prison outbreak, 114 escapees recaptured. That's attributed to the Nigerian Correctional Services. Bayo.
Yeah, thank you, Kinsley. Let's start with the news about the emir of Bungudu in Zamfara State, who was abducted along the Kaduna-Abuja highway yesterday evening. Gunmen had reportedly opened fire on the first-class emir's convoy. Though his security were able to return fire, the criminals succeeded in whisking away the first-class traditional ruler. Also in Imo State, a priest was killed at Osu in Imo State by gunmen suspected to be Eastern Security Network, the proscribed separatist IPOB military wing. The priest was alleged to have brought in military personnel to secure a church and a secondary school under his supervision. And in the war against terrorism, Abu Musab al-Banawi is said to have been killed. He is the son of Mohammed Yusuf, who was killed in 2009 by security agents in Maiduguri, which eventually led to the launching of the Boko Haram.
But where is the source coming from, source of the information? Since the military says it doesn't know about it.
The military say they are not aware about it. But there has been supremacy war between the various factions of the group. Mohammed Yusuf was the original leader of Al-Sunnah Jihad, which was for short called Boko Haram. After he was killed, Shekau became the leader. But Shekau pledged loyalty to ISWAP, Islamic State in West Africa province. And Yusuf Mohammed's son, who is al-Banawi, rebelled against Shekau, and his people succeeded in killing Shekau in May. This time, there has been rivalry between the various groups, and al-Banawi and some commanders are reported to have been killed. But the military says, as far as they are concerned, the war is ongoing, and they are not taking that into consideration.
So they're having internal crisis.
Well, there are two versions here, according to the paper, on page 5, where the story jumps to from the front page. One saying that he was killed by Nigerian troops, and the other version saying he died during the rival war within the ISWAP camp. Now, the first version revolved around information shared among security operatives. Then, however, a different source where al-Banawi was killed, that's somewhere around the Bula Yobe axis, that he was ambushed and he was taken down. So, but what is clear is that Shekau, on his own, of course, hasn't issued any statement for a long while now, which would tend to confirm that the cat with 9 lives has been put to sleep. And then al-Banawi, in the meantime, it's also been, according to this newspaper, been taken down. And so let's see what happens in the coming weeks and months. But of course, they have a replacement strategy. Once one is taken down, another one quickly comes up.
When the leaders are dying, it may be difficult for them to have a very strong base.
Yeah, but their decimation, obviously, is ongoing from what we are seeing from the military. Well, sorry, I want to just move very quickly from the northeast to the northwest. We don't have the story here on the front page. If you recall, Kirian, I think you and I were also on set on that day. We were discussing what steps the state governments, first Zamfara, shut down of telecom services and markets, and Katsina, no shutdown of, no total shutdown of the telecom services, but filling stations were now directed no longer to sell petrol in jerry cans and so on and so forth. There is a video that I got yesterday, and the video was showing the men of civil defense official, they were of course communicating in Hausa, that what people are now doing, some persons are now doing, obviously suppliers to bandits and kidnappers, they are now buying petrol and fuel, maybe diesel or otherwise, in polythene bags and sacks.
And hiding them among foodstuffs.
And hiding them among foodstuffs. I mean, so you ask, I said dangerous, but at the same time, you know, it amounts to clear sabotage of the efforts by the security agencies to, of course, tackle banditry and kidnapping. They are now, so I think there was one filling station that was showed, officials of the DPR were sealing off that particular filling station. The only thing that I observed with that video, and I hope the civil defense authorities will be more careful, if you have such volatile material, you would require the fire service to be around you while you were packing them into your own pickup trucks. And in fact, pickup trucks are not even the best thing. If you want to prosecute any person for that, you only need one or two, and you have to have a safe way of conveying them. Because the way the officers were just carrying the things, I mean, as Nigerians would say, God forbid, if there was something like a spark or otherwise, it would be like what we normally would get. But it is important for the state government officials and other persons to put their ears to the ground and find out those who are buying petrol and diesel in sacks and in polythene bags, and then, of course, arraign them.
There's no going saying the fact that there are conspirators there. And the governor of Zamfara State has emphasized that several times. Of recent, many of them have been arrested. In fact, one disturbing situation was that was why he asked for the communications setup in his state to be switched down. Because whenever there were initiatives by the security and there were movement, persons were calling these bandits and giving them off information, which was critically sabotaging the initiative of the security. So, but the Senate president yesterday commended the gallantry of a Nigerian soldier. Ahmed Lawan, upon resumption from the annual vacation, said recent successes recorded in the fight against insurgency, banditry, and the country is very encouraging. He urged the security to sustain the campaign until they have rooted all of them out of our country. He recalls that the Senate approved 800 billion supplementary for security and intelligence agencies. He also called for sustaining trajectory of fund in the 2022 budget. Meanwhile, he has called on the committees on defense and intelligence to heighten their oversight to ensure that the resources provided for are used for the purposes of strengthening our security. Meanwhile, President Muhammad Buhari has sent a communication to the Senate requesting the Senate to approve external loans. The approval is sought for $4.054 billion and 710 million euro, as well as a grant component of $125 million. They are loans that are part of the 2018 to 2021 federal government external borrowing plan. They are to be financed through sovereign loans from various banks around the world. The loans are for projects by federal and state governments geared towards realizing Nigeria Economic Sustainability Plan. A summary of the key projects, as well as their location in all the geopolitical zones, was attached as an addendum. The Minister of State for Mines, Steel and Development, Dr. Uche Oga, has raised an alarm that private jets are being used to smuggle gold out of Nigeria. He emphasized that the menace is done through the connivance of security agencies, host communities are collaborating, and the level of application of technology, as well as negative mindset by Nigerians. Dr. Oga, while revealing this to a Senate committee, actually called for a mine police to be established and a special court and tribunal to trial offenders. He, in fact, prescribed capital punishment as one of the means.
The point is that the nation does not have a clear template when it comes to mining activities in this country. So that's why, some persons are involved in illegal mining and will be able to carry out such a smuggling activity that you're talking about. In some African countries, mining is basically their source of income. I wonder why over the years we have not really been able to establish mining as a good source of revenue in this country. I don't know, but they say the planning. How long are we going to carry out this plan, gestation period, that we cannot enter into mechanized, mechanized mining in this country?
Industrial scale.
Or industrial scale mining in this country. So people are now using the opportunity to do what they are doing. So complaining to National Assembly will not change the narrative. What will change it is that we have now become serious about our solid minerals, tapping our solid minerals officially as we are tapping oil that we have in the south part of Nigeria. That is basically why and they can't even stop it because they don't have the wherewithal to stop it.
Well, if you recall, one of the earliest steps taken before the 2019 general elections was to prohibit all mining activities in Zamfara State. If you recall,
yes.
They said because
there was also a no-fly zone.
A no-fly zone was subsequent.
Subsequent.
No-fly zone, and then of course telecoms brought down. But we have also said, if you recall last week, that when Nigeria is seeking to mediate in the affairs of Guinea-Conakry following the overthrow of the administration in that country, that they should look at what is happening in Guinea. Guinea is a magnet for foreign investment in the mining sector.
Exactly.
The mining sector is up and running.
Exactly. Not just
industrial scale mining.
Exactly.
And interestingly, any mineral that is in high demand around the world is available in one of the several states of Nigeria.
That's right.
Every state has solid mineral. All the states have mineral. So at this point, Bayo, we have to go because the producer is beckoning on us to conclude this segment. We're overrunning. So thank you indeed. We hope to see you again tomorrow for more analysis on newspaper review. A lot of issues keep coming up on daily basis. Sure. And so producer
interesting
things. So don't blame us for overrunning. Thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Bye. See you again tomorrow. Yes, we'll take a short break now. When we come back, we shall be looking at a revenue sharing formula. Stay with us.
Has commenced second phase of COVID-19 vaccination. If you are 18 years and above and unvaccinated, register at www.nphcda.vaccination.gov.ng. Visit the nearest vaccination site to receive AstraZeneca or Moderna COVID-19 vaccine as first dose. If you received your first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine before 8th July, get your second dose now. All COVID-19 vaccines are free and certified safe. At the vaccination site, you can check blood pressure and know your diabetes risk status. Children aged 0 to 23 months will receive childhood vaccines and screened for malnutrition. After vaccination, continue to adhere to COVID-19 prevention protocols. For more information, visit www.nphcda.gov.ng or call 0700-220-1122. This message is from the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency.
He's falling sick so frequently, either fever or stomachache. I keep him away from junk food.
She also feeds me apples. She says an apple a day keeps...
If you want to keep germs away, then also wash your hands regularly with Dettol soap.
Meaning?
Germs and disease spread through the hand also. For this, use Dettol soap. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol sure.
I dey enjoy Nollywood film, Orisun, PBO, AMC, be my best channel. But ST Nollywood Plus, they show the latest Nollywood blockbuster on top classic bouquet. How I want to watch them?
My pikin dey enjoy 5 children's channels, but he won't come add DreamWorks on top am.
I be telenovela lover, and I like ST Novella E and Starlight. But I hear say the series on ST Novella E Plus on top classic bouquet, they totori person pass waiting I dey see now, and I won't watch them. shey I go need pay 800 naira extra?
From September 1, Star Times dey sama you better package, but no fear, we no increase price join this offer. Make basic bouquet subscribers just pay for 1 month and dem go fit to watch 3 ogbonge extra channels from Classic Bouquet. This awoof never finish o. Recharge Classic or Super Bouquet for 1 month and you fit be one of the 400 lucky people dem wey go win smartphone. Terms and conditions dey sha o. More value, same price. Star Times, enjoy digital life.
Dear compatriots, our country can be as great as we want.
Let us all commit ourselves to its greatness.
We must be willing to set aside our differences, unite and stay as one.
In our expansive landmass, human and material resources, and plurality lies our strength.
Let our challenges lead us to rediscover our common ground, and together, let's find solutions.
This will take some time, so it requires patience, tolerance, and forgiveness from every one of us.
Let all hands come on deck to protect and transform our country.
Let us unite and see each other not as adversaries, but as brothers and sisters.
Together, we can build a better Nigeria for ourselves and for the next generations.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, NOA, with support from Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
After a surprise loss in the first match of the season, the citizens have hot their campaign back on track. Will they continue in their winning form or can they be stopped? Find out this Saturday as Manchester City welcome Southampton to the Etihad Stadium on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 2:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, as a prompt for our conversation, which is on a review of Nigeria's current revenue sharing formula, let's listen into this background put together by our correspondent, Abdulsalam Jibril.
Debates about the fairness and unfairness of the revenue sharing formula in Nigeria have been a never-ending conversation that is as old as the country. Several attempts made over the years to review the formula were unsuccessful due to the change of government, absence of the National Assembly during the military, among others. The last time the revenue sharing formula was reviewed was in 1992, that is 28 years ago. That review is the current sharing formula in place today, where the federal government takes 52.68%, subnational entities, that is the states, take 26.72%, and local government areas get 20.6%, while 13% is allocated to derivation going to the oil-producing states. There have, however, been growing agitations for the revenue-sharing formula to give more resources to the states, local governments, and the export commodities-producing states. In July this year, the process to alter the national revenue allocation formula by the federal government, states, and local governments was initiated by the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission. It stated that political changes, coupled with the emerging socio-economic challenges, are justification for the ongoing review. The Commission maintains that it will first concentrate on the vertical formula, which has to do with sharing of revenue between federal, state, and local governments. It also stated that there will be a horizontal formula for sharing among states and among local governments. As Nigerians await the outcome of the Commission's work by the end of the year, some experts insist that revenue should be allocated to the tiers of government based on the functions they perform. Others insist that fiscal federalism, internally generated revenue, and the changes in population of subnationals should influence the sharing formula.
And we have guests already seated here in Abuja studios and elsewhere. I'll always begin by introducing Chairman, Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Elias Mbam. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, and we also have a professor of capital market and former commissioner for finance, Imo State. He is also the president of Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria, Professor Uche Uwaleke. It's good to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, Professor Uwaleke, thanks. You're a regular on Good Morning Nigeria. Another regular on Good Morning Nigeria is joining us this time from our Kano Network Center. He's a professor of finance and entrepreneurship and dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Kaduna State University. But as I said, he's from Kano studios this morning. Professor Yushao Ango, delighted to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, Engineer Elias Mbam, Chairman of Revenue Commission, a pleasure to again welcome you to the program. We, of course, taking a look at Nigeria's current revenue sharing formula and perhaps what to expect at the end of the year. But tied up to all of that are issues of IGR, which is also a factor in revenue allocation, and what subnational entities could on their own do. But just walk us through the process and procedures for enunciating a new revenue sharing formula. And therefore, tell us, why has it taken nearly 3 decades for us to, as it were, chisel out a new formula?
Thank you, Kingsley. You know, one of the major issues that touches everybody is allocation of resources. And the process has to be thorough and is very sensitive. And in doing this, the Commission takes a lot of steps to make sure that what comes as is equitable, just, and fair. We invite memoranda from Nigerians. We sensitize them to participate actively in the process. We also carry out research on fiscal matters relating to revenue allocation. You need to know what are the powers of each tier of government? What are the responsibilities? You need to know what is the cost of providing these responsibilities. Because the ultimate thing is to share the resources to match, to directly proportional to the responsibility attached to each tier of government. We also make consultations to leaders, past head of states, organized private sectors, institutions like governors, forum, National Assembly, states, local governments, to make sure that each group contributes to the process. When you have gathered all this information, we set it into 2 categories, the objective and the subjective. The objective are those derived from data. That what is the budget? What is required to provide security? What is required to provide education? We get those data, and that forms the data for the objective. Then the views we get from people, from institutions, Nigerians, contributions is a subjective. But the major part of the weight is on the responsibility, what we get from data. The last attempt we made, we had 75% for the objective and 25% for the subjective. Why has it taken so long to review? Because the last review was in 1992. Fortunately for us, the law says when it's already reviewed, you should not repeat the review within 5 years. But it never gave boundary of how long it will take to review it. So if not, it could have been caught by law. Because this is 28 years since the last one. Several attempts have been made. But I feel that political will has been an issue. And also, people don't have confidence, lack of confidence, that this, if it's done this way, these ones are likely to shoot us. And not over-politicization of the process. And fairness, because each person wants his own group, his own area. If we include like density of population, places like Lagos and Kano, we say, that's what it should be. The population should have 90%. When you talk of landmass, a place like Niger State, we said landmass should have the highest one. So all this has contributed in not making it to work. But I believe this time we are geared to ensure that it works. And more people, the government is interested, the National Assembly who will be involved are interested, and Nigerians have seen the need to review the formula. And I believe strongly that this time around we will succeed.
All right, very interesting indeed, because there are a number of issues that you have actually raised, or points rather, the objective and the subjective, which are also considering data collection and what have you. Then the IGR by states, landmass, population, and what have you. These are some of the indices, that will determine what you're going to come up with at the end of the day with respect to determining what is going to be the current revenue sharing formula. Let's bring in Professor Waleke here now. You've listened to him, and of course everybody believes that there is need for a review of revenue allocation, and threats are coming in from different quarters. What is your own view, with respect to the issues arising from this re-evaluation of the sharing formula?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kirian. You see, the issue of revenue allocation, which is also a function of revenue, mobilization, has been with us for years. Over the years, several commissions, we are set up to address that until we now had the, the revenue mobilization, allocation and fiscal commission. It all boils down to, just what he said, the structure that we operate in. It's particularly so in a federal structure, okay, because it's at the, if you like, the heart of fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism is simply about, how the tiers of government, federal, states, and local government, in our own case, relate in terms of responsibilities and, taxing powers. So it is at the heart of fiscal federalism. And the one we have now, which gives a disproportionate share of the revenue to the federal government, is what is creating some of these agitations. That it has to be, if we are running a federal structure, it has to reflect the federalism that we're running. A situation in which the federal government, for example, takes as much as 52.68%. As a matter of fact, it's actually 48.5% under the vertical allocation. But because the federal government also controls the special funds, which is 4.68%, namely the FCT 1%, the stabilization, 0.5%, ecological 1%, and then natural resources development 1.68%. So that is under the control of the federal government, which is why people think the federal government controls 52.68%. So the states now get 36 states now get just 26.7%. And the 774 local governments, are getting, 20.6%. So the agitation is to tinker with this sharing formula to be in favor of states and local governments that are more at the grassroots. Which also brings me to this, is closely related, is as a corollary. Why is there this controversy right now, with the issue of VAT? Okay, it also has to do with the sharing arrangement, because there are people that feel that the controversy arising from VAT is more because of the distribution issue. That VAT is actually not a collection issue. That is more of a distribution issue. Okay, a situation in which you have, of course, we know for VAT, the states get 50%, the local governments get 35%, and the federal government gets 15%. But what's more important is in the horizontal allocation of that formula. Let me even start with the one that is for FAC, for horizontal allocation. In horizontal allocation, the criteria that is used to do that, the term indices, you have equality of states, 40%. You have population, 30%. You have land mass or terrain. Maybe I will talk about that later. I was wondering why that should be there in the first instance. Land mass terrain, 10%. Then you have IGR effort. Okay. So you need to tinker with that structure as well.
Professor Waleke,
yes.
Explain this much clearer for our viewers, because you moved from revenue allocation vertical to VAT, and then you came back again to horizontal. Okay. So stay, you are a professor, so stay with revenue allocation.
Okay.
To say the revenue allocation, we already work out the percentages, 52.68 for the federal, states get 20 point something percent, and so on and so forth. So let us say the states now.
Yes.
The states have their share of 20-something%.
Yes.
Now, how do the 36 states of the Federation access that 26%? That's where you came in with the horizontal factor. So explain that.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes.
So I was saying that states get 26.7% of what comes into the FAC. Now, out of that, the allocation is done using certain criteria or indices, as it were. You have equality of states, 40%.
That is to say, all states, will take 40% from that.
Yes.
From that trove.
Yes. 40% is allocated. 40% of that is allocated on the basis of equality.
Of states, yes.
30% is allocated on the basis of population. Okay, and that also brings me to the point he raised. These things are if you like, are based on data. Okay, if you don't have accurate data with respect to some of these things, it will be difficult to implement. Now, that's 70% already accounted for. You also have 10% based on land mass or terrain. Again, that's also where the boundary, commission comes in. All right. Another 10% is based on IGR effort, and that's why it's also important for states to ramp up their IGR, because it's also a factor, a criterion for the allocation. The higher your IGR, the higher you get, in that
basket.
Yeah, that basket. That's why states like, for example, Lagos State, Kaduna, Kaduna that stops now on IGR, will also get more on account of that. And that should be encouraged, because that's also what we find in some other jurisdictions. Maybe we will also come to that later, what happens in other countries. Then you now have another 10% for social development factors, where you have education, health, and water. So again, sometimes, for example, under health, one of the things you find under health is they want to know the number of hospital beds, in a particular state, and stuff like that. Again, that also speaks to data, having adequate data. So when you don't have adequate data, some of these things become a matter of, guesstimates or estimates. and which, of course, doesn't augur well for the allocation. So it's an issue, and I think it's time, and I want to comment what they are doing at the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Commission. It's time we change that, at least to recognize that under true federalism, okay, as we are devolving powers, as we are assigning more responsibilities to lower tiers, that should also come with the issue of allocating more revenues, to them.
Okay, let's now go over to our Kano studio where we have Professor Yushao Ango. Professor Ango, you have listened to Engineer Elias Simbam and Professor Owaleke, try to explain the issues surrounding a review of the sharing formula, revenue sharing formula in the country. Let's get your own view of all these issues and know where you will, think the Commission should tilt towards to ensure that, all the agitators are properly taken care of when we finally get, the final, nod for what the Commission will have to present to the nation.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the points have been clearly explained by the engineer and Prof. Normally when we have this kind of interaction, I leave the details to Professor Walike. He brings the details all the time. But having said this, I think what the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission is doing with regards to conducting researches, I think that is very commendable, so that we rely on appropriate data, in doing this thing. Now, my concern sometimes on this issue, sensitive as it is, as the chairman said, is the fact that in this country we are always consumed by how to buy the cake. We are not spending as much time in baking bigger and larger cake. I also like the fact that the Commission is looking at both objective and subjective criteria. Now, the preponderance of opinion largely that I read up and what I've heard today is that the federal government appears to be getting more than enough. But I have a contrary view. It depends on the responsibilities, just as it has been stated, that has been given to each tier of government. What is happening now is that the federal government has a lot that it's doing on its exclusive list, and even among the concurrent list of responsibilities that are assigned to them. Secondly, we also have to take note of the fact that in reality, what we see in Nigeria today is that in most of the states, the state governments are controlling their portion, and they're also controlling the local government portion. They are not allowing the third tier, to actually utilize and function appropriately as they should. So technically, it's almost 50-50 between the two, if you divide it into two. And then I think another thing, and then maybe looking at the distribution horizontally, I like the distribution on general equality. That one is appropriate. The population is realistic because you are catering for a certain population. But one thing I want to comment on, or I think the Commission should also consider, especially when it's looking at those social factors, is to look at the poverty rate. The level of poverty in some parts of the country, given the structure of the economy, is worrisome. So you find that the economy has been structured in a way that it favors certain areas naturally, due to certain natural endowments. But then we are a country, we are the same country, and whatever happens to one part of the country affects the other. It's not in the best interest of this country that one part, for example, or some parts are facing serious problem of poverty and others are flourishing. I think what we should do, whatever it is to ensure that we carry ourselves along and ensure that everybody is doing well. I think that should also be something to look out for in future in terms of this review that is being conducted.
All right, Professor Yusha Ago, thank you very much there for your opening shots. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Back to the studios here, Engineer Elias Mbam, Chairman of the Revenue Allocation Formula. There's a question I would like you to address in the meantime. Actually, two of them, but let's take the first one. Now, there is an optimistic projection that the new revenue sharing formula could be out by the end of this year, which is 2021. And earlier, when you were explaining, and we do know that one criterion has to do with responsibility, say on the vertical scale, amongst the tiers of government. What do you do? What is required to do this? Excuse me, and so on and so forth. Some would then argue that responsibility is a function of power allocation by the Constitution, which you would find in the legislative lists, exclusive and concurrent. Now, there is a current effort at further amending the Constitution. And yesterday, when we discussed the resumption of the National Assembly at plenary, the Senate Committee Chairman on Rules on Business did say that constitutional amendment will be one of the key bills that the National Assembly would pursue. Chicken and egg. Is your commission going to await the amended Constitution? That is to see whether there is a shift in functions by way of the legislative lists before it now says, okay, this is what we are doing with the revenue formula. Or you want to go ahead with your new revenue formula, meet your self-set target of 2021, and whatever comes out after the amendment. I know that amendment will take a while. Apart from National Assembly passing, you also have to go to 24 states, for their concurrence before, of course, it then becomes an amendment to the Constitution. So, what are you doing first? You are proceeding with your own formula, or you will proceed with your formula and tarry a while until you see what the new Constitution might look like by way of amendment.
Thank you very much. The Commission has programmed that by the end of 2021, we should be ready with a new revenue allocation formula for presentation to Mr. President. We cannot wait other organs of government. We have a responsibility to the country. And so we deal with what is present. Suppose it does not come out, what do we do? So, and the provision in the law, you can still review it later. So we are going to deal with what is present. If in the process of the review, the amendment is carried out, we factor it in. But so far, we still have an existing law, constitution. Our actions will be based on what is the subsisting laws. We won't wait for anybody.
Wouldn't there be, well, you said assuming the amendment did not take place, the amendment is ongoing, and there's every likelihood that at some point the amendment will take effect. And why I'm saying this is the fact that I can see how long it has taken for us to have this review of a sharing formula. And if eventually the amendment that we're expecting will affect, responsibilities of the three tiers of government with respect to concurrent and, of course, exclusive list, how would you now re-amend yours? Because invariably, if that happens, it has to be reflected in whatever you're going to present to Nigeria.
Yes, you have been here with us. Some review we are not conclusive. So there's nothing that tells that they must conclude this one. I'm not saying that. I'm not praying for that. But it's a possibility. So we cannot wait for them. And we also expect that as they are reviewing, if they come out with a new responsibility, the Commission will still review and reflect the new changes. But there is no need for us to wait until it's something we don't know when it will be concluded. So we go and sleep and wait for them to do their own work. This is one of our major responsibilities and mandate as a commission. And so we should tackle it.
Okay, so you do your work, and when you finish with your work as a commission, again, tell our viewers what the next steps would be.
The law says that when we complete, we present it to the president. And on receipt of that advice from us, he will table it before the National Assembly for further consideration. So there are three levels for this review. The commission will finish, make a presentation of what they are recommending to the president, who in turn will table it before the National Assembly. It is when the National Assembly has considered and passed it that it becomes law.
It goes back
to the president for assent.
Professor Waleke,
go ahead.
Because this is Nigeria, and we know how things pan out. When we come to issues that are complicating, as this one is. Because arriving at a conclusion after a job well done, by the commission, arriving at a conclusion is one thing. Another is the responsibility of the National Assembly as far as this is concerned. Assuming the commission patches whatever they have come up with to the president refers to the National Assembly, is there any possibility that the National Assembly could also make amendments on what the commission presented to the president? If the answer is yes, I don't know what the law says about it, but if the National Assembly make their own recommendations that may counter some of the, some of the points, by the commission with respect to the final document, what happens?
Kirian, maybe that question I leave it to Kinsley. Kinsley is a lawyer. He's a barrister. but let me say, it's also akin to what we also experience in the in the budgetary process. The budgetary process, I think Section 89 of the Constitution, gives the president the power to lay before the National Assembly the appropriation bill. It has to be before the commencement of the the following year, without specifying the exact time. Okay, so the president now lays that appropriation bill. It has a size, for example, and then the National Assembly goes ahead to tinker with it. Okay, these days we find sometimes they increase. So it has always been a question: does the National Assembly, have the right to increase the budget size beyond what the president has laid, before it, or is the power of the National Assembly, okay, as also found in the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, is it restricted to amendments or tinkering with the appropriation bill within the size of that envelope? So these are the issues, that have always been there. So I wouldn't know whether the National Assembly, will have the power to change whatever the president has done. Of course, even if they change, eventually it will still get to the president for his assent. So if he doesn't agree, it also becomes a problem. But let me speak to, one point that my colleague,
Ishao Ango.
Yes, Professor Isha, mentioned. Of course, he's right. It's good to consider, poverty. Poverty is a function of, if you're looking at poverty rate, you're looking at unemployment, you're looking at inflation. So in states where you have high rate of unemployment, high rate of inflation, you will also expect that the level of poverty or misery index, will be very high. But in allocating revenue using the horizontal basis, the indices or the criteria tend to use those things that encourage states, to do more in that area. Now, equality is something, you can is there. Equality is meant to drive even development, for example. Okay, population is also there. As I mentioned earlier, as a matter of fact, while I was Commissioner for Finance in my state, somebody came and said, how do we increase the allocation that comes to my state using those indices? We can't do anything about equality, but we can. That's in terms of population. Can we even, it was a joke anyway, can we even ask people to can we even encourage
procreation?
Procreation, to at least get more from that aspect. In terms of I talked about the, of course, terrain, landmass again giving, but the social development factors, health, education, in number of schools, for example. If you have more, you get more. Health, if you have more hospitals, more hospital beds, you get more. So these are things that are meant to encourage you to do more. But if you put something like poverty rate, it means you see states, struggling to increase their poverty rate. You get the point I'm making. That's why you won't find something like poverty rate in that kind of indices. There are things that are meant to encourage you to do more. In some jurisdictions, I was mentioned earlier, we also had it before. We had the chairman, you recall that in the past we had things like the principle of need, okay, and it became a contention. How do you measure need? In some jurisdictions, it's based on the your expenditure. They look at your expenditure and then allocate based on expenditure. Okay, but in our climb here, the issue would be again how to get accurate figures on of that, what that expenditure has been. So the point I'm making is that when the horizontal allocation is being considered, the indices are being considered, certain factors that are used, or the indices that are used, are those ones that are meant to incentivize the state to do more. One of which, and that is why it's important, maybe you consider increasing it, is the IGR effort. IGR effort currently is 10%, but if it is increased, it will ginger states, to do more in that area. Because I recall too, while I was commissioner in my state, we had that focus. If we increased IGR, of course, that also meant in terms of allocation, we also, have more. So for a state that struggles to increase IGR, it becomes a win-win situation. You get more from IGR. In terms of allocation, you also get more.
And then the IGR you collect doesn't go into the federation account.
No.
It just becomes a factor
exactly.
in your receipts from the federation account.
Beautiful.
Professor Yusha Ango, I want to keep you on hold in the meantime because you raised a point that I would like Engineer Elias Mbam to respond to. You said, by way of obiter, but also crucially, that our focus has been more on allocative issues rather than, say, baking the cake. I want Engineer Elias Mbam to enlighten our viewers, because the full name of your commission is Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission. What is the mobilization aspect of your commission's work?
Thank you very much. As you rightly said, the first name after revenue is mobilization. And we have said in several fora that we are concerned more in increasing the size of the cake than dissipating our energy to share a shrinking cake. And the Commission has gone into action in this. It has carried out sensitization in all the zones in telling people, telling states to diversify, states and local government, telling them what is available in their areas, what they can do to diversify. Because the ultimate way you can increase the revenue is to diversify from oil and gas. And we have quite a lot of them. There is no state or zone that doesn't have one form of solid mineral or the other. Why can't we develop a solid mineral sector? Why has agriculture gone back? When we were small, I knew local authority, county council, what they called. They were collecting bicycle licenses and things like they were raising. The local government had gone to sleep. They do not do anything. They just come here and collect the check. They stay the same thing. And that is why I support what Prof said. We should encourage people who generate more internal revenue, because the revenue is there. It's just for you to have the political will to actually. So the Commission has intensified its activities in sensitization, in asking government to diversify. And right now, most of our officers are in the field. identifying what are available and what could be done so that we yield more revenue. We also want to lock the leakages. There are a lot of leakages in several areas. So we want to ensure that those leakages are blocked. And if it's blocked, we have more revenue. So we are doing a lot in that respect. And it's really a result. Because a lot has improved from the states we went to, and we are continuing. It's a major part of our work.
Yeah, now, what I've just explained also has the constitutional angle to it. And I want Professor Ango also to come back, because he raised the issue initially, the issue of breaking the cake or expanding the revenue horizon of different states. But again, you know that states may not have the constitutional power to, for instance, go into solid mineral exploration. Of course, agriculture is there, but then when it comes to having a major base for IGR to improve in states, you talk about exploration of minerals, which of course they don't have any constitutional right to do. Professor Ango, lead us into areas that you think some states of the Federation could expand, their revenue base, to beef up their IGR, because this sole dependence on revenue collected at the center from the center is not helping matters.
Yes, that is correct. In fact, as you mentioned and has been mentioned earlier, the issue is that every state has some mineral resources or the other. But like we know, mineral is an exclusive matter. It's a matter that the federal government has control over. Agriculture is a revenue source somewhat. There used to be some taxes that were collected for foodstuff that has been transported and all those things. But given the reality of some states, like I said, fortunately or unfortunately, the structure favors some states. The agricultural production takes place somewhere. The processing of those agricultural inputs is taking place largely elsewhere. The traditional thing is inciting industries. One of the best way to site industries is to site them near the source of raw materials. But the reality of what we have now is that people tend to move or site industries where probably there is a lot more consumption of the power to buy those resources and all that. So what happens is that the hinterland, which produces a lot of agricultural materials, is not utilizing them, is just producing them raw, and they are not processed. So now, whom do you tax? If you are to tax the itinerant, the smallholder farmer, how much will you get? So really, that is one area ordinarily where we can get a lot of revenue, but it's in processing. So I hope the states that are disadvantaged should probably take a cue from, say, Kaduna State, for example, that has been mentioned earlier, where you can now encourage big-time processors to come to your states, establish processing mills that will now be processing those materials that you're producing. Then you can make money from agriculture. Another way that I said structurally we have had issues, but these have been resolved, is that even banks and other institutions that are set up, in the hinterland, the tax that the bank workers were being charged over the years were actually being paid to Lagos state government, for example, because most bank headquarters are in Lagos. It's only of recent that state governments woke up to this, and they are now insisting that the tax, the payee, should be actually paid. But issues are still around getting paid, or at least refunded for all the previous taxes that have been paid elsewhere. So like I said, unfortunately, we have a structural issue whereby, for example, even funds that ordinarily are cleared, in the banks daily, through the clearing process, end up in one location in Lagos. And of course, because the banks are also headquartered there, every funds that are mopped up here are there. So more often than not, all the credits, at least substantial portion of the credits are also given over there. So that leaves here dry. And then if here is dry, whom do you tax? Where will you get the money? So it's a structural issue. But I agree that everything should be done to encourage for these states. So given what you have, necessity is the mother of invention. We have situations, we have challenges. We should, in these kind of areas, attract manufacturers, attract miners, even if it is federal government, facilitate, do everything possible so that they can come and operate in your domain so that things will happen. But this will take time. But I hope that we should have this focus, and I believe as much as possible, every state should do well, every part of the country should do well, and that means the Nigeria is doing well. But it's not good if one part is doing well. It's not their fault that they're doing well, but it's good for every other person to do well. And it's good to encourage, others to do well as well. Banks, for example, when we are talking about credits, they discriminate substantially against hinterland. There are banks in this country now that will not lend to you if you give them, say, property in Kano. You have landed property in Kano or Kaduna or Enugu. They will not accept. They only accept landed property in Lagos or Port Harcourt. There are banks like this in this country. Now, that is completely stopping these other areas from developing. And how will they catch up? How will they develop? So, when you go around these states, you see that every time salary is paid, that is when you see activity. That is when you see people queuing at the bank ATMs. And then after that, nothing. So this has to change. Beyond even the question of sharing the revenue or whatever it is that is made from the national corpus, we need to encourage and ensure that every part of the country is doing well. We need to make sure that policies are there in place that encourage and make every part of the country to prosper. It's not good that some parts will prosper, will do very well, and some parts have up to 87% poverty rate. Is no good. So I think we need to do something about it.
Yes, you can come in.
Yes. When I was mentioning solid mineral, I didn't mean it was limited, or diversification in general. It's not limited to states and local government. The federal government, we are encouraging federal government to diversify. And I don't also agree that because mineral resources is an exclusive list, there's nothing the state can do to encourage the development and, of course, revenue from that side. If they provide a conducive environment for people to invest, the federal government still invests through people. If they use, for instance, I know of some areas where they are carrying some exploitation, and you find that the youths are not arrested. They don't allow them. They pack away and go. So the state should be able to provide an enabling environment for those factors that will generate revenue to flourish.
And your conducive environment, the state where I come from, Enugu, is rich in coal, and there's a conducive environment in Enugu when it comes to coal mining. What has happened there? You are right in what you're saying, but I'm just adding that, look, some states may have that environment you're talking about. But of course, we have a serious issue when it comes to development of solid minerals sector in this country.
Indeed, Kirian, part of the challenge, and Professor Yusuf Anga, I hope you're listening to this, part of the challenge that the solid minerals subsector is facing actually comes from the states. Yes. Because at seminars and workshops and reports published by NTA, which is the government agency that takes a look at the extractive industry, states ordinarily have been encouraged to set up SPVs, that is special purpose vehicles, to participate in the solid mineral sector. But it appears that in some states, and this is often an argument between the Ministry of Solid Minerals and the state governments tend to set up their own layers of supervision and control in contradistinction to what the federal government is doing or the plans already laid out to say, look, there's a mining cadastral office. one-stop center for you to go to and say, obtain your license, go to the field, and then start operating. But then when you get to the field, the states now come with another layer seeking requirements and all kinds of things. And some of the potential investors have stepped out and said, look, we can't continue like this. Yes. So that's part of the challenge we face with solid minerals. But I would like Professor Yushua Ango to also take this into consideration. When you were talking about structural imbalances in the country, 5 points that you raised, and indeed one of the key issues there, I think is something that we have to explore because you are also a former banker. I've heard this in terms of mortgages or let's say secured credit transaction where you require collateral, that a number of financial institutions do not accept collateral other than if it is from Port Harcourt, that's to say Rivers, in fact that has to be Port Harcourt, or from Abuja here, Federal Capital Territory, or from Lagos. Occasionally they accept Kano. Why is this so and why should it be so? That's one point. But earlier you talked about another aspect of structural imbalance, that you see some states are heavily industrialized, others are not. The country witnessed de-industrialization from the mid-1980s following the structural adjustment program. Otherwise, before now, you had industries in different parts of the country. In Kano, you had a number of industries. Some of them, of course, are still functioning. In the northeast, you had a number of industries, whether motor assembly plants or processing plants, veg fruit. I remember we used to take that in the 80s that were processing it. You go to Kaduna, textile industries were all over the place. Berek battery, was also there, and in different locations. So now, if you say correcting structural imbalance should be a function of revenue allocation, some persons would argue that already we have a reindustrialization agenda on the table by the government. What's your response to this?
I mean, I agree with you to that, that there were a lot of industrial activity taking place all over the country. And I also agree with you that the problem started from the 80s. For example, I can tell you, aside from Kaduna and Kano, here in the northwest, the Gusau was also a major industrial center in the sense that there were a lot of cotton spinning mills that were there. There were a lot of oil mills that were processing granite and other oils. So that was there all along. I think, in addition, I want to also point out that, like you said, I think this issue of structural issues will be issues for another day. But I want to point out that, just like the engineer said, that yes, states can do something a lot. Between 2003 and 2007, I was one of the sectoral consultants to Zamfara State government, for example, on SMEs. We recommended then that they should set up a kind of mining company, by which they should get partners from wherever they are. Because arguably, even though it has been stated that every state has solid minerals, I think Zamfara State has the highest rate of all these compared to other states. Probably that is why we are having all these issues in Zamfara. Now, we recommended that they do that. Now, of course, subsequently I learned that they did. So states can actually, like the chairman said, can actually initiate policies aimed at encouraging others to come. The issue of youth restiveness, yes, it's a fact. If you remember, when Dangote bought over Benue Cement, for example, there was a lot of restiveness. So they could not start operation, and it affected everything there. I think the country as a whole should go towards improving this, or bringing back at least this level of industrial activity. And if that is done, probably all other problems will be sorted out, as in, at least in terms of revenue generation capacity of these various governments that are here. But like I said, there was another point which I made, which I believe should also be considered, the fact that in reality, when you are doing the horizontal, when you are doing the vertical, you have what is going to the federal, you have what is going to the state, you have what is going to the local government. But in reality, in practice, largely, what goes to local governments is equally being managed by the state. So it's almost 50-50.
Well, you actually raised that. The temptation is strong for me to ask the chairman of the commission whether that could be a subjective factor to merge with the objective factor. But Uche Waleke, professor and former commissioner for finance in Imo, I'm not asking you to self-incriminate, but this is a point that we have often heard on Good Morning Nigeria, and perhaps, let's say, it's a notorious fact, that the local governments have been emasculated by the state governments. And as Professor Yusha Wango is saying, in a sense, it's almost 50-50, that federal government collects 52.6%, and then the states virtually collect the balance. Because, I mean, you cannot be a local government chairman and stand up to the governor. You will hear the announcement on radio that...
and that will entirely make, nonsense of what the commission is trying to do, because if after allocating to different tiers of government, and at the end of the day, that of the state and local government is controlled by the state, it then means that nothing has been done. And again, that the effect of that will not be, it will not be impactful positively when it comes to, development of those areas.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why it's important to, give more attention to elected local government officials, as opposed to having administrators. Because when you have administrators, of course, they can't say much. But again, that depends on who is the chief executive. Okay. While we were there, I must, I have to say this: my governor at the time gave, if you like, financial autonomy to local governments. Okay, I represented the state at the FAC. I was also a member of the FAC post-mortem, committee. And anytime our allocations, came, okay, of course, that of the state will be under the Ministry of Finance. That of the local government was also given to them. Okay, so as I said, it depends on who is the chief executive. My governor then was not interfering with the money meant for local government. But let me respond to some issues too. Having said that,
we don't have the mechanism to
yes
to really determine what your government did at that time, because.
But we'll take his word
what he said. Yes, we'll take it because he was the finance minister. Yeah, because that's in a joint account, which is constitutional and managed by the state. But what we're saying here is that
Kaduna State has abolished that
exactly.
joint on its own. Yes, and you can see
we didn't also exactly during my time with it, they had their money, they had their funds.
Yes.
So
okay,
I was trying to respond to some of the.
No, we're going to do that after this break. Okay. Let's take a short break. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and of course the topic is very, very, very germane with respect to national development. And so we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation. Do stay with us.
In 2015, the Buhari administration has recorded unprecedented achievements in all sectors, especially in the provision of infrastructure, which is the key to economic growth. Never in the history of this country has any administration done so much with so little. I recall that when this administration came into the office, the price of crude oil, which provides for 80% of Nigeria's budgetary revenues and 95% of foreign exchange earning, dropped drastically, thus reducing the amount of resources available to the federal government. In spite of this, the administration has continued apace with massive infrastructure developments.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
He's falling sick so frequently, either fever or stomachache. I keep him away from junk food.
She also feeds me apples. She says an apple a day keeps...
If you want to keep germs away, then also wash your hands regularly with Dettol soap.
Meaning?
Germs and disease spread through the hand also. For this, use Dettol soap. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol sure.
After a surprise loss in the first match of the season, the citizens have hot their campaign back on track. Will they continue in their winning form or can they be stopped? Find out this Saturday as Manchester City welcome Southampton to the Etihad Stadium on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 2:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu and powered by Integral.
A new edition of TV Guide is out exclusively with Governor Simon Lalong of Plateau State.
Since assuming office, our rescue administration has pursued the path of peace and reconciliation and restored confidence among people of different ethnic, religious, and political persuasions. Peace is back on the plateau. We are building world-class infrastructure in roads and opening up opportunities for innovation.
The edition is a compendium of mind-blowing stories for your reading pleasure, ranging from entertainment, economy, sports, media, politics, family, and lots more. Pick up a copy and keep abreast with issues and trending features within our space. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Well, one of the definitions of politics, is the authoritative allocation of scarce resources. And when we're talking about revenue sharing, is a major part of it. And the points that I guess I've raised with respect to what happens at the state level is very, very important, for us to discuss. I don't know whether we'll have time for that, but then it is constitutional to have a joint account between the states and the local governments. But what happens thereafter when the money comes is determined by whichever state that is concerned and who is in charge, as a Professor Waleke pointed out. So let's go to Prof. once more. Waleke, you want to speak to some of the issues that have been raised?
Yes, thank you, Kiren. I was going to say that if you look at the factors that are usually responsible for low revenue generation at any tier of government, what has been established, at least we know from theory, is that you have low income level. Okay, so revenue generation is a function of income level in a certain area. You also have the nature of the economy of that area. Okay, whether it's agrarian or whether it's industrialized. You have also other metrics like the ratio of international trade to GDP. But let me even speak to the first two I mentioned, the income level. So if you're a governor of a state, and you recognize that income level is a function, or revenue you can generate is a function of income level. Okay, what it means is that you now work to improve income in your area. Because that explains why you find the discrepancy, the wide gap between, for example, the IGR of Lagos State and the IGR of maybe one of these states that have low IGR. Okay, so you work on the income aspect, and how do you do that? Is to attract investment, is to make sure that the majority of the income in that state is not just by civil servants. Okay, because we find in some states, over 90% of their IGR, comes from the personal income tax. If you look at the tax jurisdiction, states collect personal income tax chiefly. It's on the concurrent list. The federal government also collects personal income tax with respect to armed forces, police, and so on. States also collect capital gains tax, okay, when it has to do with individuals and persons. States also collect stamp duties for individuals and persons. Federal government also collects stamp duties and capital gains tax at 10% CGT, okay? But importantly, too, states also collect business registration permits and so on. So the more businesses you attract to your state, the more money you get by way of IGR. Okay, and that speaks to the need to make the state more business friendly. Yesterday at the bankers conference I was attending, the Lagos State Governor, who was in attendance, was introduced. During the introduction, he was introduced as the most friendly, as the most business friendly governor. Okay, and I got an applause for that. Okay, and that's, of course, impressed me. So if we can have, so many of them like that, then you can be sure that some of these states will on their own attract investments. If you look at the capital importation reports that MBS releases, in this country, you will find that virtually every time MBS releases capital importation reports, it's only a few states that are actually attracting, especially, foreign investments into the country. Okay, so this has to change. Now, the other one has to do with the nature of the economy, whether it's agrarian or industrialized. So if I were a governor too, and my state is agrarian, and I know that it has been established that as an agrarian state, there's little you can do. Just as Professor Ango was saying, okay, if it's just raw materials and you're not processing, you have a problem. So the issue is, how do you transit from agrarian to processing? And that's where the issue of this, access to credit, comes in. The banks, not being willing to lend to, firms in certain areas. Okay, and that's also why of course, I want to say here that for banks are business enterprises, and this is not something they can do by way of compulsion. It can only be by way of moral suasion, which is why the central bank, has been using some tools to incentivize them to lend to the real sector. Okay, one of which is this differentiated cash reserve, ratio. If you lend to a particular sector, by way of cash reserves, you get some, concession. So what I'm saying is the central bank can continue to use some of these tools to encourage them to lend to these other places. Then on the issue of solid minerals, I recall a time when, usually when we attend the FAC, the presentations are made by various revenue generating agencies, and anytime Ministry of Solid Minerals makes a presentation, we would say, why is your own always very small? Because what they usually present is usually very small. And the argument is, you can't compare us with the oil sector. How much are you giving the solid mineral sector? Okay, these are two capital intensive sectors. Okay, so the impression I get is that not enough is being given to that sector by way of investment. But of course, we can't rely on the government to do that. The private sector too can come in, especially from the angle of the capital market. And that is why I'm happy that as we speak, to the best of my knowledge, I'm aware that the Nigerian exchange, okay, is in discussion with some states, with a view to helping them to develop the solid mineral sectors in those states through what you mentioned. You said SPV. SPV works through securitization. Mm-hmm. So through securitization, for example, this solid minerals industry, in particular, can be developed.
Professor Uche-Waleke, there's a point I want you gentlemen to speak to. And first, Professor Joshua Ango, the chairman of the REMFAC also touched on it briefly. Because Uche-Waleke says that, well, yes, IGR is a function of income level, activity, industrialization, and so on and so forth. But Engineer Elias Mbam reminded us, years past, there used to be bicycle licenses. It was a tin plate. It was, I don't know who was issuing it, but we used to see it, bicycle licenses, except for cycles that children were riding, or the ones who go and hire for half a penny for 30 minutes or 1 penny for 1 hour. But how come none of that? There used to also be licenses for dogs. You have the license on the dog collar. It was there. But let's just focus, say, on personal income tax, which is paid, and therefore a function of residence. That's to say, you reside in a particular state, you pay your income tax in that state. Is it that state governments have become just too lazy to collect personal income tax, or we would need to even rejig our tax laws? Why am I saying this? How much personal income tax do state governments collect? Let me, again, I will use my example from my state. In the 70s, it was called personal income tax. Whether you were working in the urban area, of course, if it was formal, you were paying formally, that's payee. If you were in the rural areas, there was always a tax collector. If you are a farmer, you must pay to the tax collector. It's called Igunhu, that is like, say, head tax. You will pay, and he will keep a record. If you saw that revenue collector and you had not paid, you would run into the bush because you know that the revenue collector will do it. And then, of course, he will report you and then you face the consequences. Today, how much let me just say how much income tax or personal tax do the states collect from adults who are also willing to enjoy government services? Put that against the background of what we know. Every day, you will see these bike operators, they give them ticket, 100 naira. Where does that money go to? If you go to the motor parks, before you move, those people, they pay, I don't know, 100 naira, 500 naira, 1,000. Yeah. And some of these unions are very wealthy. Their accounts run into billions. In the meantime, state governments are financially anemic when it comes to personal income tax collection. Is there anything wrong?
Quite a lot of things that are wrong. What you said about bicycle license, dog license, and all those things, they were actually, it was the responsibility of local governments then, native authorities or local governments, as it were. I think what happened is we became complacent, with the oil money and revenue coming monthly. So we forgot some of those taxes. In reality, even the personal income tax you are talking about, there are people everywhere that are well-to-do, that are supposed to pay tax. They are not paying taxes. What government in most places rely on, including state governments, is the payee. It just has been stated earlier. If you are from a formal employment, you find that you are paying a lot of money. I know how much I pay monthly is so much. But you see people who are very well-to-do, who are earning a lot of income, but they are not paying, they are not being taxed. I think one of the areas that state governments in particular, local governments too, need to improve their take is if they have to do something about the laws, they have to do it. They have to insist and collect personal income tax from well-to-do people who are earning a lot of money. Yes, you also mentioned what these unions are doing. A lot of it, some of it is not even accounted for. There is no accountability. I don't know, maybe you cannot tax them, but if there are any laws that will permit, that proper records be kept, I think those are necessary. Another area is the issue of buildings, land, the payments that you're supposed to pay governments, in terms of ground rents and all that. A lot of states are automating and computerizing their land registry. That is a way that enormous amount of money can be made by state governments. I think there is some state and local governments are relaxed, largely because monthly something will come from the federation for them to somehow. I think these various areas are not being exploited. So I think in that regard, so much needs to be done. And like you said, for you to do that, you have to, for the local governments, for example, they have to appoint people, especially who will do or who will collect those revenues. Now it's even easier. With automation, with technology, you can easily, and now that we have NIN, we have BBN, we have all these things in place, I think we can monitor things if we are really serious about it. I think, and we need to go that way because relying on money that comes largely because of oil revenue and all that has a time limit, so we cannot rely on that. Our population is growing. We need to go back to the basics. We need to find whatever we can get as in form of revenue, we get it. And I think automation and technology will help out in this regard.
All right, there was talking about feeding bottle federalism, which has affected. Kisly, you are talking about paying tax. Those days in the marketplace, if the collectors come, you see people running head
That's enough. Ogbemudia, who was military governor in the early, I think 71 or so, they had combi boxes. You know what was described? I say, pay now. Pay now. If you saw the pay now, you see adults, taking off.
All right, sir. In just 20 seconds, right? Your final words on this, and when are we going to get this the new formula out?
Thank you very much. We expect that at the end of this year.
That's in December?
December 31st, before
31st December.
We have it. Well, my last word is to appeal to Nigerians to participate actively in this process, to let us know their views, and also know that there is a process. The aim of the review is not to give any tier of government an advantage. I don't like a situation where people are already awarding what it will be. The process will determine what it will be.
All right, sir, but after all said and done, there will be allocations to different tiers of government, and people are expecting to have a change. Because if there's no change, then there's no need for review.
No. If they review, the process at the end says what is present is correct, then we go by it.
All right.
But
all
it
right,
should be
Chairman.
a process, not what we predetermine.
All right, sir. Chairman, Chairman Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Elias Mbam, we thank you for your insight into this very important matter. We hope that by 31st of December or before then, we'll have a new sharing formula. Professor of Capital Market and former Commissioner for Finance, Imo State, Professor Uche Owaleke, thank you for your usual professional touch to your explanations on this issue. And of course, from Kano, we had Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Dean Postgraduate School, Kaduna State University, Professor Yusho Ango. We also thank you for your very incisive contribution this morning. All right, now let's go to sports.
The much-touted International Women's Football Invitational Tournament, Aisha Buhari